This week on the agenda, the trouble with tourism. As the industry rebounds post-pandemic, is it time to rethink the way we travel? Travel and tourism was, of course, one of the sectors devastated by the COVID pandemic. But the return to normal hasn't been without challenges, with protests across Europe as locals complain about over-tourism pricing them out of their own homes. Joining me now to consider the state of global tourism as much of the world heads off on its summer holidays is the Executive Director of UN Tourism, Natalia Bayona. Thanks ever so much for coming on the agenda. Now, COVID-19 made 2020 the worst year in tourism history. Has the sector fully recovered from the pandemic?
We have very good news. International arrivals reached 97% of 2019 level in the first quarter of 2024, reflecting, of course, almost a complete recovery. An estimated of 285 million tourists traveled internationally in the first 3 months of 2024, 20% more than in the same period of 2023. And of course, these results were boosted with the strong demand. Remember that China, Japan, Korea were the last markets that opened. And of course, they are powerful markets for Europe. And if we add more air connectivity and the strong visa facilitation between countries all around the world. So at the end of the day, the numbers are good. The total export revenue for tourism reached 1.7 trillion. That's 96% of recovery. So at the end of the day, the numbers are there. Tourism is, of course, a strong sector when it comes to economic development. And challenges are there, as you were mentioning before.
So let's talk about those challenges, because you say, right, that the numbers look good, but the economic backdrop remains challenging. We've got all these geopolitical tensions and conflicts which are all playing into it. What impact does all that have on the tourism industry?
Economic and tourism, of course, is the most human economic sector. Tourism is not tourism without the human capital and the natural resources. So when we are in times of geopolitical tensions, that doesn't mean confidence and trust. And without those two values, tourism, of course, contracts. So we have challenges all around the world. We have the improvement of inflation, high level interest rates, volatile oil prices that, of course, impact directly in transport and in the accommodation costs. If we add these, that's why we need, to work together. This year, the World Tourism Day, that is September 27th, the theme, the thematic will be tourism and peace. And basically, the idea is to bring opportunities to lead the voice of how we can, through innovation, through education, through investments, or through intercultural dialogue, we can assure that we can balance again everything related to these tensions, and at the end of the day, that the economy grows accordingly thanks to tourism. So there is wealth in the whole sector.
I just want to pick up on something you brought up there, that word balance, because while the numbers show that the visitor numbers are getting back to those pre-pandemic levels, what that then means is the conversation around over-tourism comes up again. In Spain, where you are, there have been thousands of locals taking to the streets protesting about there being too many tourists. How do you see that changing tourism in the future?
That's very important, and this reminds me, this is like a deja vu. Before COVID, there were a lot of protests as well because people wanted more regulation and, of course, more balance in the way tourism was working. Of course, the pandemic came and everyone understood with a drop of more than 74% in tourism. Everyone understood the power not only in the economy, but also as part of the social cohesion. Today, of course, part of the things that are happening in the mature destinations is that people, citizens, residents, see that, of course, with the short-term rentals, with different touristic apartments in residential areas, a lot of tourists coming, and of course rising the prices, is affecting the quality of life for most of them. So I truly think that in these mature destinations, what we need to do is to connect, and to have a sincere and transparent conversation between the academia, the private sector, the government, the local government, and of course the residents or the representative of the residents, so that everyone feels that is having strong benefits from tourism, that the economy is going well, but at the end of the day, that citizens are happy and that the quality of life is getting better. And I have seen very good initiatives. I have seen Barcelona, for example, the Jaume Colboni, the city's mayor. He already said that he will increase the night tourist tax. That in 5 years from now, there won't be short-term rentals, as you know, that happened in New York, where short-term rentals are not allowed. If you see in Canary Islands, they just launched an amazing communication strategy to talk about responsibility and tourism. They already have, they are working on a vacation rental law. They are promoting tourism eco-tax to bring money for sustainability. So I see that of course the actions are there, that the governments and their local administrations are working together.
Of course, there's lots of conversations around not biting off the hand that feeds you, because tourism, travel and tourism, is a huge boost to so many of these economies. And it's forecast to grow at double the rate of global GDP. I mean, that's astonishing numbers. But I wonder how important sustainability is to that growth story.
Absolutely. To me, sustainability, in my personal opinion, sustainability is not only about climate change and about preserving the natural resources. Sustainability at least needs the power of different verticals, technology, to create a smart destination management procedures, so that you use technology for good, you use artificial intelligence to create new projections and new forecasts on the different type of tourists that you want. Where do you promote what? How do you disperse tourism so it goes to different areas and it's not only concentrated in the big hotspots of a destination? Second of all, of course, the power of education and the impact of tourism in the society. So how this is helping on the creation of new jobs, how this is helping in entrepreneurship, how this is helping to rebound the SMEs, and how this helps in the quality of life of the tourists, and of course of the residents and the citizens. And last but not least, of course, sustainability is about preserving human and natural resources. So with preserving them and working on having waste management procedures in the hotels, working better in recycling, in the circular economy, in creating a conscious commercial strategy. At the end of the day, this will help everyone. So connecting all the verticals will help us to sustain the sector as an economic sector, but as well as a sector that brings wealth to the society.
It seems like what you're saying is the whole travel and tourism ecosystem is changing. I'm wondering if that's what you're seeing, if the demand is now for more eco-friendly and sustainable holidays.
Of course, I feel that today more than ever, people are conscious because, of course, you see, when you see the news and when you see climate change, of course, is a reality. and is part of the global flow and the global agenda. So, as I mentioned before, human resources and natural resources are the most important resources to make tourism bright. We need more consciousness on the way we preserve the destinations, on how we give back to the society as tourists, so that all the good values of tourism on liberty, education, etc., are there. And I see that today there is a move to what people say like invisible luxury, So to go to places that are not known, to go and work with local communities, to go with the indigenous, and to understand different cultures. So more than ever, people want to be in authentic places to help on their preservation and, of course, to give back to the society. It doesn't matter if it's a big city or a rural area, but at the end of the day, little by little, we need to send that message and, of course, to make these a trend a full reality that stays in the midterm future.
You mentioned before how important China is to global tourism, and China's reopening, the return of Chinese tourists to the rest of the world was a real milestone. What trends are you seeing there?
What I see is that China is a strong country, of course, when it comes to tourism, because China has recovered its position as top spender on international tourism in 2023, as Asia and the Pacific consolidate all the impact. So I can say that Chinese expenditure on travel abroad reached $196 billion in 2023, ahead of countries like the US, like Germany, like the UK, like France. So Chinese outbound and inbound tourism is expected to accelerate in 2024 due to the visas facilitation and improving their air capacity. So China is applying visa-free travel for citizens of France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Spain, Malaysia. That's amazing, because at the end of the day, that is helping the country to bring people from mature destinations that know how to travel, that loves culture, that wants to see new things. So at the end of the day, the reopening of China, it was the final piece that we need in tourism to assure the recovery. And what I see is a strong commitment of them to keep working on the tourism promotion, not only to bring Chinese all around the world, but as well to bring people to discover this China that is open, and where you see we have a strong effort on promoting from the history of the tea, the Silk Road, and of course, the urban tourism that they promote, normally speaking, when you go there.
Natalia, Bayona, thank you very much. As we heard there, the post-COVID recovery has led to a real pushback against over-tourism. Thousands of locals across Europe have taken to the streets to call for higher tourist taxes and restrictions on holiday lets. The largest protests have been in Spain, from where I'm now joined by Pere Joan Femenia, spokesperson for Menys Turisme más Vida. Less tourism, more life. Thanks ever so much for coming on the agenda. Now, why are residents in parts of Spain so up in arms over tourists?
Yeah, because now we have a model that we increase too much the name of tourists that came to Mallorca. And there are many places like us that we have limits that we can here in Mallorca, but we have this limit that we have not enough hotels and enough houses and enough natural sources. And we have to regulate this have a balance between the tourists and the economic benefits that we have and the impacts that this economy have in Mallorca. And just now we have a big problem with this, and we need to put a solution.
So you're not saying no to tourists, you're saying no to being squeezed out of the housing market?
Yes, that is right. We don't say want tourists. We don't want this kind of model of mass tourists. because we know that tourism is an important economy for us, but the name of tourists that came to Mallorca is overbooking the capacity of the island, and this starts generating problems for us, like the natural sources like water that we don't have enough, and some towns have to put restrictions to their residents, and also many people who want to go to the beach or to move around the city, and it's very crowded, the traffic there. And this is also a problem not only for us, like residents, also for tourists that want to enjoy the island, and sometimes it's very difficult.
So you're saying that tourists are putting too much of a strain on public services over the summer. But hasn't that been the case for decades in places like the Balearic Islands? I mean, what's different? What's changed?
Yeah, now we have a new historic record of name of tourists that came to Mallorca. In 2024, this year, we are waiting around 18 and 19 million of tourists that came to Mallorca. This is like 17 times more of tourists that persons who live here in Mallorca. And this obviously causes an impact because they need public services like transport, public services like the health. And this is what, when increase the demand, is decreasing the quality of these services, and also affect for people who live here and people who want to came to visit Mallorca that have this kind of problems. And I think it's an important impact that people is doing this demonstration and these actions against the model of tourism, because we need really to change the direction of this.
So let's talk about changing that direction and finding that balance, because tourism is worth more than 10% of Spain's GDP and almost 50% of Mallorca's. It's a huge part of where the jobs come from, certainly for young people like you. But that's where we see many of the largest protests. So you need that tourism cash. So what do you suggest about getting that balance?
Yeah, that is an important argument, because we know that tourism is one of the most important activities for our economy. But we have to know how this is doing benefits for people who live here and what impacts is creating. Because right now, people as me, young people, we can buy or rent a house because increase too much the prices, because it's renting for tourists that generate more benefits for people. And also the problems that the economy, where the economic benefits goes, because right now we have more difference with people rich and people poor than some years ago. We decrease in Europe 100 position the name of the PIB per capita of the persons who want money here. And for the reasons, we know that money is not creating benefits, it's creating desigualities between people, because right now we have like 21% of people who have problems to arrive to the end of the month.
Now, I was in Portugal recently, and the locals were telling me how tourists are still coming, but they're spending much less. This sounds very extreme, but some of them are renting cars and sleeping in them rather than booking a hotel or booking an apartment. They shop in supermarkets rather than in bars and in restaurants, who really rely on the tourist trade. I wonder if that's something that you've noticed too, and how much of a problem is it?
Yeah, we know that Spain is a very low-cost economy, and this also increased the name of tourists that want to come to visit us. We don't have problem with this, but we know that the economy don't work well, because the last years many tourists came to Mallorca every year more, and increased the name of money that is spent here. Maybe not the money for each tourist, but increase the money that generates benefits here. But we are thinking, what about this money? Where it goes? If for people or only for the economic system of hotels and lobby touristic? Because we have this problem that we don't receive these economic benefits, and it's generating people who have to live in caravans or some people have to go out to Mallorca to continue the life because here is impossible.
Pere, Joan, Femenia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Still to come here on the agenda, shaping the future of tourism, while we all need to take responsibility for our travels.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the agenda. As we've heard, the anti-tourism protests across Europe, along with the increased demand for more sustainable holidays, have put so-called responsible tourism at the top of the travel agenda. Here to explain how that new drive might play out is Professor Goodwin, Managing Director of the Responsible Tourism Partnership. Thanks ever so much for coming on the agenda. Now, let's start with explaining what this is all about. What do you mean by responsible tourism? How do we define it?
Responsible tourism emerged at the end of the last century because there was increasing concern that people were mouthing a commitment to sustainability but not actually doing anything. So responsible tourism is about what you do to make tourism more sustainable. It's most easily understood as making great places for people to live in, because great places to live in are great places to visit. So it makes commercial sense, but it's also about focusing on the quality of life and the environment, the cultural and natural heritage in the destination, and actually doing something to make tourism more sustainable.
And that's inevitably going to need a lot of collaboration between tour operators, hoteliers, governments, and of course the tourists themselves. Everyone needs to come together. So how is that happening?
It's happening in a few places. What I would argue is we see in the Responsible Tourism Awards every year businesses which are taking responsibility for some things. So they may choose no longer to give water out in plastic bottles. They may worry about the sustainability of their food sourcing. There are things that individual businesses, individual guides can do which have an impact, but obviously to have a major impact it has to be done at the destination level, and you need to bring together essentially those three groups: tourism businesses, the community, and the governments that act on behalf of those communities. So to give you an example of this, we wouldn't have plastic water bottles littering the environment if nobody was selling water, potable water, to tourists in plastic bottles. So you could drive that out of any destination with action by businesses, communities, and governments at the local level.
That's the action, that's the commitment you're talking about. Where's the demand for responsible tourism coming from? Is it from the destinations, from the locals, or is there demand from tourists themselves?
There is demand from tourists themselves, but they need to be helped to do it. I mean, if you go along, if you choose to travel with a metal water bottle, which more and more tourists do, particularly the younger tourists, and if there's nowhere to refill that bottle with potable water, you can't use it, can you? So it actually does mean it's about, the easiest way to think about it, I think, is that it's about editing people's choices. It's about enabling them to make the right choice because that's what you offer. There's a lot of evidence that tourists increasingly want to purchase that kind of thing. And there has been for the last 20 years. The industry has been slow to respond.
Some of the things you're talking about might end up being more expensive. When we talk about sustainable, maybe when that comes to where the food is sourced from, for example, maybe it's about the material that the hotels or the transport is being made with. Pushing the prices up, is that something that tourists are happy to shoulder?
Of course not. But nor is it inevitable. Responsible doesn't need to be more expensive.
Elaborate.
Well, if you take the water, let's stick with the water example. If you've got a system for filtering that water, making it available, it's for free. They don't need to buy it. And many responsible hotels now do only use glass containers on their tables and they purify the water themselves. They filter it and purify it and make it available to the tourist.
I suppose what I'm talking about is when you see advertised these eco-friendly, sustainable holidays to exotic destinations. If you're going to be greener in terms of the way you travel, that might take longer. It might end up being more expensive. If the hotels are being more mindful about where they're fishing or where they're sourcing the food from, it might push up those costs. Again, if you're going to be responsible in terms of the staff that you're employing, you might be paying them more, and all of that filters through.
It does, but you need to look at the costings in a more holistic way, it seems to me. I mean, if you reduce food waste, for example, which would be to be responsible, you're reducing your input costs. If you're growing and sourcing the vegetables locally, you're making local employment, and you're not having to spend the money on the fuel to import the vegetables. There's a whole series of things that you can do that don't necessarily cost more money.
And who or where is doing responsible tourism well? Give me some examples.
Well, probably the leading example now in the world is Kerala, southern India, where they are addressing the issues which matter locally. So they've improved the livelihoods for local people. They're sourcing more and more of the fruit and vegetables from the villages which are being visited by the tourists. They're developing their own crafts rather than importing them. They're offering village life experiences where tourists go and have what in South Africa would be called a township tour, but they visit different families in the village, and the family is paid for your visit, and you can make a piece of coir rope or learn to weave palm leaves. All kinds of things you can do, which are both enjoyable for the tourist and benefiting local community.
And do you see more national governments maybe working responsible tourism into their national policies? I know Visit Scotland, for example. That's one example. They're calling it the new normal. But is it?
No, it's not yet. But I mean, if you don't call it the new normal, it never will be, will it? I mean, it's a statement of objective to move towards that. The way it's done in any particular location will be subnational, because although some issues are global, and the obvious ones are plastic, which gets into the oceans, carbon emissions and biodiversity extinction, but most of the other issues are local and need to be managed locally. So most of the movement towards responsible tourism happens at the subnational government level. It's local authorities and national park managers who have the biggest opportunity to make the change.
Now, before COVID, China's travellers were a huge, huge part of the industry. Where do they sit now in terms of responsible tourism?
Many of them are already travelling in ways that it took the Europeans 20 or 30 years to make the transition. I live in a small market town, Faversham in Kent, and we still occasionally see individual Chinese tourists travelling alone. And I remember coming out of mid-Wales before COVID and seeing a hire car parked in the middle of the road, 4 Chinese tourists all out with their cameras taking photographs of sheep. So they were travelling not in an organised group, on their own in a hire car in mid-Wales, a place that many British people have never visited. So they are beginning to travel in a very different way, and they're getting there very quickly.
Professor Harold Goodwin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming up on a future agenda, the esports games. We'll look into the business behind the newest entrant to the Olympic family. But for now, from me, Juliet, Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.